Hey, today we're going to talk about subject verb agreement and some logical agreement. Now, for a lot of you that are native language speakers, this will just be a quick review and most of it will come more naturally and you won't have to think about a lot of it. If you are, however, working on English as a second language, it's one of those things you have to study. And I know that from having studied Spanish and having to conjugate verbs, and I've written so many note cards on verbs and verb tenses, and I still am not sure when to use which past or which present tense. So it's really not it's easy generally in your native language, but if you're not a native English speaker, it's something that does take more practice. So I'm just going over some basics and some tricky spots. If you are not a native English speaker, then it just is practice. It is time. What would take me in English 30 minutes to write when I took my Spanish classes and wrote papers would take me 4 or 5 hours. So again, it's all practice, practice, practice. But let's go take a look at it. So it's really in a lot of ways a matching game. We want to make sure that our verbs and subjects are matching. For example, a very simple example is this one. The student wants to go home. In English, we have one student, and then our verb, if it's a regular verb, takes the S. If we have many students, then we have the students want to go home. So again, if you're a native speaker, that one's pretty straightforward. Here's one that is a little bit tricky, not a whole lot. She and her friends is at the fair, or she and her friends are at the fair. Do we match to she? Do we match to her friends? Do we match to all of them? Well, what we do know is that really, who is at the fair? They are at the fair. And one of the tricks you can do to check your agreement is substitute. Are you going to say it, he, she, they, them, us, we? Pick out which one you're really talking about, visualize it, and then try that and see what happens. Here we would say they are at the fair. So although this is a very simple example, that a substitution method of using they or it is something that can help whenever you get to examples that may be a little trickier. Now this one is also a tricksy one. The book or the pen is in the drawer. The book or the pen are in the drawer. Here's what we have to remember. In this case, unlike she and her friends, here we have the book or the pen. And or means one or the other, but never both. So what we're really saying is the book or the pen, we're actually saying it is in the drawer. And so in this case, we've got to pay attention to that little word there. Now, one of the places where we can kind of mistake our matching, in the first case of she and her friends, it had the and, the book or the pen. It was one or the other. But sometimes there are other words in between, and a lot of times those are prepositional phrases, and they just use these prepositions. Now, in English, prepositions are often very tricky because they are used idiomatically. It's just that's how we say that. So it does take a little practice, but what you want to remember is they are extra information, but they're the kind of extra information we need. Remember when we did our commas with the extra information? The student who made an A helped me study for my test. If I just say the student helped me study for my test, you have no idea which student it was. So I want to say the student who made an A and not put those commas in, because that is important information. And the same thing happens with these prepositions. They're often telling us which one when we're talking about subjects. So let's check out an example. The woman with all the dogs walks down my street every day, or the woman with all the dogs walk down my street every day. So here what we have is we have this prepositional phrase with all the dogs. This tells us which woman. It's like that student, which student, the one who made an A, it's just talking about the student. And so what happens whenever we take away the with all the dogs is we end up with just the woman walks down my street every day. And so by getting rid of those extra words in the middle that are extra in terms of giving us a description of who we're talking about, but not extra in terms of don't need it, not necessary, we can check and see which one matches with the other. So here's another one. Try this one out. One of the boxes is open, one of the boxes are open. Now, if I ask you which one of these is the subject, it's very likely a lot of you may say boxes. And that's because boxes is a noun. We see it as a thing. Boxes are open. But notice this, we've got this preposition of the boxes. So what is this telling us? This is not part of our main sentence. Our main sentence in all reality is one is open. That of the boxes is just telling us which one. And so whenever we have those prepositional phrases, they're just phrases. Again, that kind of stuff's not going to be on the test, but they're just phrases, parts of sentences that describe something else. We don't really count it in our matching, though of course we leave it in our sentence because it is very important. Here's another one. The book, including all of the chapters in the first section, is boring, or the book, including all of the chapters in the first section, are boring. So here, notice that what we have here is we have these commas. The book, comma, including all of the chapters in the first section, comma, is boring. Now those commas are definitely a signal to say this is something that's not necessary. We could take out. And when you see those commas in there, then what you know is that stuff, if it's not a list and it's not connecting those two full sentences with that coordinating conjunction, then what we know is that is a detail, maybe important, it's very vital to the writing, but it's also something we can take out. So when we're trying to match our subjects and verbs, if you see the commas around the two things, then you say, hey, wait, let me not pay attention to this while I'm seeing if these two things on each side match. And so what happens is we end up with really the book is boring, because everything in the middle was just an extra detail. It didn't tell us which book. It was just giving us extra details. So we end up with the book is boring. Now, one of the things we also need to talk about is logical agreement. And logical agreement is, here's a great example. Finally, I heard the three words I had been waiting for. Will you marry me? Did you catch what was wrong with that? Wait, the three words, 1, 2, 3, 4, doesn't agree. It doesn't match up. What we want to make sure and do is say, finally, I heard the four words I had been waiting for. Will you marry me? And this is one of those things that often we miss or we don't see because in our mind, we've got it right. We picture it there. I read my writing. Makes sense to me. Point is, what we're studying here is how to get what's in our head and what's in our heart on the page so someone else can read it and get it exactly, get what we meant. So that's one of the values of workshop. Whenever we share our writing and have somebody else read it, it is all about having a reader. Writing is made for readers. And if you don't have one, then how can you tell they got it? All professional writers, all good writers, people, when you're writing something high stakes, if I'm writing an email that is going out to the whole college, I have my friend Miss Mann, whose office is right across the hall from mine, and I say, can you read this for me? Because it makes sense to me. But the moment somebody else reads it, if my words don't say what I meant and they say what I think I meant, then it's not going to work. And so this logical agreement thing is one where our brains are constantly fixing things. Our brains, our eyes, we don't really see what half of what we think we see. Our brains are filling in things on the periphery, filling in all sorts of things. Our brains are very powerful and they want to help us all the time. And one place they help us too much, and it often becomes something that is problematic, is in our writing. We know what we meant, but sometimes those words don't mean what we meant. And so having someone else read it is very important. And this is one place where that becomes even more important because they often see that. Let's look at another more common one of these. People stay healthy when you eat well and exercise. Now, this happens when we use you willy-nilly, and it happens because we hear it, we say it, we speak in a very different way than we write. But one of my favorite examples of this is watching a commercial, sitting on the couch watching a commercial one day, and it was a commercial for a testosterone supplement for men, and it said, when you turn 40, men start to lose their testosterone. I had just turned 40, and so I realized I was the cause of it all. No, that's not what they meant. They meant when men turn 40, they start to lose their testosterone. So whenever you are using you in a paper, and when we write the very formal papers, when we write our literary analysis and we do our media analysis, those are very formal papers, and we will not use you unless they're in quotes, because we are not talking to just one person. We are talking in general. And so when you're writing your cover letter to me, then you want to say, when you read this, as you go through it, can you give me some advice on this? Because you're talking to me. You're talking to Kelly. If you're writing a letter for a job, even if you don't know, even if you just said, Dear Hiring Committee, you still would say, when you look at my resume, one of the things I hope that you will notice, the most, or one of the things that you won't see is, what was reflected behind those jobs, whatever you're saying in that letter, because you are writing to that one person reading it. On the other hand, when we're writing general essays, when we're writing very formally, who do you mean by you? In the case of when you turn 40, men lose their testosterone, they obviously meant when men turn 40. So the best way to get you out of your writing is by saying, who do I mean? Do I mean Kelly? If you mean Kelly and you're writing to Kelly, then you is appropriate. If you meant men, if you mean dragons, if you mean teachers, if you mean kids, if you mean dogs, say who you mean. If you mean people in general, use we, us, our. That collective is much more opening. People hear it differently and listen to it different ways. So the you is a place where that logical agreement can often break down in often very hilarious ways. So really work to avoid it unless you are writing directly to me. Like right now, I'm talking directly to you. And that's who I mean. So back to the show. So obviously this one was easy to fix because we just said people stay healthy when they eat well and exercise. The first one here, people stay healthy when you eat well and exercise, would be great because we could have one person per year eat well and exercise, and the rest of us could just be slobs and eat whatever we wanted, and we'd all be healthy. But that's really not what it means. It means everyone in general. And so that's a good example of how very often with that you, we can replace it with, instead of the you, the collective they, because we really mean everybody. So in the end, it's really about thinking about the logic of what you're saying, thinking about, of course, how things match. And again, a lot of this is really basic, so this is just a quick review, just something to another one of those things that as you're editing, as you finish writing an essay, as you finish writing a letter, that's the point. Get your ideas down first. What's in your head? What's in your heart? Get that on the page. And then the next step is to go through and say, okay, I know what I think I said, but do my words really say that? And that's where you have to kind of, you learn all these rules, these comma rules, those things. You learn about this matching so that you look for those things very carefully. And again, the more you will focus, if you will slow down and take the time this semester, it will, and in this class and in this moment, it will go easier for you later on. And remember, it's all about, this is not about me. This is not about having to take this class. I know you got to take it. I don't have a job. But it's really about how you look and how you create your image and how people see you in those ways. So all of those things become very important. If you have questions or thoughts, of course, send me an email, come by the office, give me a call, and we can talk about these things. If you're in class, ask in class. And otherwise, just remember that when you learn the rules like a pro, you can break them like an artist. Have a great day.